Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pluff. Each week, we will cover various topics that dads struggle with in their fitness journey. I'll give you actionable steps that you can apply right away, not only to take back control of your own health, but so you're able to be a better example for your kids too. All right. Welcome in to this week's episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Today we have Daniel Yores on the show. Daniel has his own podcast called The Daniel Yores Show, which is a great listen. So if you find that on Spotify or Apple, wherever you find or wherever you listen to your podcast, that's a great listen. So make sure you subscribe to him. But I will let Daniel introduce himself and then we will get started.
Thanks for that, and I appreciate the shout out on the podcast as well. Very cleverly named after myself. But I'm a personal trainer, online and in person. I enjoy the in-person stuff a lot more than online, but online is just the way to reach more people and whatnot. I live in Toronto, Canada, or just outside of that. I've been a trainer for almost 10 years, 8, 9 years, somewhere in and around that. And I train everyday people, both men and women, probably more men at this point than women. And I think that's just an interesting thing of who the messaging attracts. Like the messaging is always the same, the basics of diet, exercise, etc. As you know, Anthony, you're like, it's the same no matter who you're coaching, but
Right.
It's the way that you communicate that message that resonates with people. And it's the reason why you coach primarily dads, because you yourself are a father. I'm not yet in that stage of my life, although hopefully soon. And maybe the way that I speak and the messaging will change just based on that. So mostly men right now. And yeah, I mean, my intro into fitness was just basically I got injured a lot. And then I got interested in how the human body works and how we can make it work better and stop breaking. And that, led me into my education and then became a trainer after that. So that's the very short version of the long story.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so you definitely have, tons of experience, like you said, both in person and online. And I think there's an advantage to both. I think, a lot of the best coaches who train online have, a lot of experience in person, right? It's hard to kind of simulate that experience, right? It's hard to know what somebody is going through unless, you've actually, coached somebody yourself. And so, no, I think that's really great. We had the opportunity actually to talk last week due to some technical difficulties. And we were kind of jumping into about, the differences between why some clients have lots of success and others don't. And I've had lots of different clients over the years. Obviously, now I work primarily with dads, but living in a college town, a military town, in person, I've had clients from all different walks of life. And there seems to be some commonalities between why, certain clients tend to see results and others don't, even if, some of them are showing up regularly doing things. And so, with your experience, what are some things that, you would say that when someone comes to work with you, is there anything specifically that you're kind of looking forward to, not predetermine their success, but the ones that do have success, do they have anything in common that you've noticed?
Yeah, so like you said, we did try and have this conversation last week and kind of reloading it, some technical issues, which it happens, and that's cool. And I can't remember exactly, what I said last time, but I'm actually happy that we're redoing this because I kind of want to refine my answer a little bit. And I think that the thing that is most common amongst people who have the most success with fitness coaching or anything with their fitness process, especially with using a coach, is people who take ownership of the process.
Mm.
So hiring a coach is not a way to default the effort or the work, that gets put into everything that has to happen. A common
Yeah.
thing that I'll say, very, sarcastically and stuff with my clients is, "Oh my God, thank you so much. You helped me lose all this weight. You helped me, do this, get stronger, whatever." And I say, I didn't do much. I just talk. Like you did the work. And it's
Right.
sarcastic, but at the same time, like it is true. Like my job as the coach is not to do the work for you. And in fact, I
Mhm.
can't. Our job would be way easier if we could be the ones to like eat or not eat and do the work for our clients. Like I would work out 15 times a day if that meant, success for my clients, but it doesn't. And so the clients who are more willing to ask questions, learn about what's going on, ask why are we doing this? Because we don't really want, we can't offload the work. So the client who's willing to, or the client who's willing to understand what's happening more than a client who is just going to blindly follow instructions, that client will never be able to go off on their own and do their own thing. When the coaching relationship ends, when, there's a bump in the road, something else kind of comes in their way, things get squirrely and things fall off. Meanwhile, the client who has been learning, actively trying to improve themselves and understand the process and the principles of what's going on rather than like the tactics of the individual things that we're going
Mm.
after, that client is going to have a lot more success and be able to sustain that success for a lot longer, whether we're still working together in a professional relationship or not.
Yeah, no, I think, you mentioned there about asking questions. And I know the last time we chatted, we kind of talked a little bit about how maybe it's a guy thing. Maybe it's just, hard to, suck up our pride sometimes, but asking questions sometimes can make us feel weak, right?
Mhm.
Where it makes us look like we're inferior to somebody else. But whether, I know you've been inside business mentorships as well, and the ones I've been in as well too, the people that are willing to put themselves out there and ask questions tend to be the ones who have more success, right? And so a lot of times we think of asking questions as something, we can get embarrassed, right? Maybe when you were a kid, you were in school, your friends made fun of you because you didn't know something, but there's a good chance that the person who asks the most questions is going to find the most answers, right? And so it doesn't really matter. It's usually the most simple way to get knowledge out of somebody, right? So if somebody were to come and hire you as their coach and they're like, Daniel, I don't know what's going on and stuff, and they continually to ask questions, they're going to get answers, right? And I know you talked about ownership there. One of my favorite, authors and just speakers, podcasters is Jocko. I love listening to him, and he's got that extreme ownership, right? And I actually got to see. Maybe I told you this before, but I got to see Jocko live in Chicago last summer, which was awesome. Seeing him in person is a whole other experience, but I have a lot of clients who also enjoy Jocko's stuff, and so there are times I think that's a great mindset to have. Taking ownership. This is your life. You're in control. But I think sometimes clients can take that to the extreme, right? I've had clients who they believe they should be doing something and they're not doing it, and when we have a conversation they say, oh, I don't need any help right now, I just need to be able to do it, I should be able to do this, but for whatever reason they're not able to, right? And so how do you kind of work with clients to kind of get past that mindset where you're taking ownership, but taking ownership sometimes can mean asking for help?
Yeah, that you said that perfectly. I mean, taking ownership doesn't mean do everything on your own and keep bashing your head against the wall until it happens. Like taking ownership means getting the things done that you need to get done. And if that means asking for help, then that's part of it as well. There's a reason why someone is looking to hire a coach. And it's because for whatever reason, by fault of your own or not, you can't get the thing done that you need to get done. And that's okay. That's not like, we all went to school, we all had, coaches in football or basketball or soccer or whatever, because like you didn't know how to do the thing. And then the coach taught you or showed you or led you to then do the thing. And
Mm.
that's okay. So as men, like you said, it's very difficult oftentimes to admit that like, hey, I don't know this thing. But the reality is, and when we break it down very logically, it's like, well, as your coach, I would rather you ask me the question and let me know, in heavy air quotes, that you don't know the answer to it. Then I can guide you to the answer and we can come about it together rather than, watching you continue to fail and continue to tell me that, yeah, no, I'm good. Everything's okay. When we both very well know that things are not good and things are not okay.
Right.
Like when we're having a check-in call, when I'm having a check-in call with a client, every couple weeks or so. And, just as a general question, how are things going? How's everything been? Aside from their like life stuff, based on their nutrition check-ins and their workout tracking like through the week, I already know the answer to the question. I
Right.
already know like things seem to be on track or things are kind of falling off. And so the phrasing of that question is just to get the conversation going. And then when something doesn't match, where it's like, hey, your workouts have been slipping, your nutrition's a little bit slipping, and the answer to the question, how are things going, is everything's good, just got to keep going. I'm like, well, that's not exactly true. So in that scenario, then I will challenge that client, be like, well, this is the reality of what's been going on. So either you've been tracking it incorrectly, which, typos, whatever, it happens, that's fine. There's a reason why, maybe you got sick, maybe something happened, okay. Or like you're failing to admit that we need to maybe adjust something here, or maybe you need to ask for help a little bit more, or figure something else out, figure another way to attack this problem. And that's okay. It's not a challenge in a way that like, hey, there's something wrong with you. The challenge is in there's something wrong with the way that I'm helping you, because obviously taking the extreme ownership approach in the other direction, like part of Jocko's book is that like everything falls on the leader. So you as the coach, you are the leader. If your clients
Yeah.
are not having success, if my clients are not having success, it's my fault. It's not their fault. So
Yeah.
so I need to find what I can do to better support that client. It becomes very difficult if the client doesn't ask any questions, says everything's okay, even though everything is not okay. But it's my job to continue to dig into that and figure out, well, where can I support you better? Where can I help you better? Where can I lead you better? How can we change things that makes it a little bit simpler for you to follow or stay on track, or whatever the issue is here. So that's a very long-winded way of saying, to answer your original question. The way that I'll approach that is simply to lay it out for the client. Be
Mhm.
very logical about it. I'll challenge you. You said that things are okay and you have no questions. Well, if you have no questions, then things should be perfect. And these are the markers that we should be seeing, yet we're
Yeah.
not seeing them. So where are we dropping the ball here? And then once you kind of spill that out, then it becomes a little bit more open, like, okay, you're right. Maybe we need to do this. I wasn't sure about this. And then we can really open up the conversation, and then I can provide better support.
Yeah, yeah, and I think challenging clients is what great coaches do, right? We're challenging their beliefs, we're challenging their perspective. We're not just cheerleaders, right? We're trying to get the most out of them, and being challenged um, raises kind of a red flag for a lot of people, right? If you think a certain way for probably your whole life, and then someone's telling you like, hey, like, is this work? It's the classic precision nutrition coach, how's that working for you? Right. It's like, it's just being honest with yourself there. I think that can, kind of, tug at the ego a little bit there, kind of like, is what I'm doing actually working? And chances are, yeah, like you said, if we have no questions, things should be going perfectly. It's like when you're in high school and your teacher's like, anybody have any questions? Nobody has any questions.
Yeah.
Okay, well, everybody should get 100% on the test then, right? It's the
Right.
it's the same thing. We kind of get out of that mindset where it's like, we don't know everything. We know we need help, but for whatever reason, we're not willing to ask for it, right? And so you have clients you work with in person and online. I've noticed, and this isn't always the case, but there's a pretty big difference between those who clients who I work with in person and those I work with online, right? The people who work with online, it's not always the case, but they seem to be a little bit more self-sufficient, or they're at least wanting to be.
Hmm.
They're at least wanting to kind of have that long-term approach. In person, I have some clients who I meet with just once a week. It's just more for accountability. They're working out on their own. But then there's a whole kind of a separate population that comes, and the only time they're working out is when they're with me. And as a business perspective, that's great for me, right? Because it's like they're going to keep coming. They keep coming for coaching, for training. But what I've noticed is those clients tend to struggle to see results long term,
Hmm.
because if I'm out of town, or they get sick, I get sick, somebody, where something doesn't go as planned and we're not able to meet for 2 or 3 weeks, they don't work out for 2 or 3 weeks. And so what are some things you do with your clients to kind of educate them on more of kind of a long-term fitness approach?
Yeah, so I'm in the same boat as you there. I mean, my in-person clients right now, it's not many. It's very few, and that's
Hmm.
intentional, just for lifestyle and logistical reasons. Um, my in-person clients right now, if I don't work out with them, they will not work out.
Yeah.
And they know that, and I know that. And if they listen to this, like, that's not, this is not a surprise. Like,
Right.
that's just the reality of the situation. Now, they're all a little bit older. They don't have these real heavy, like, weight loss or muscle gain goals or anything like that. It's
Hmm.
more just kind of lifestyle. It is somewhat social for them, and it
Right.
is more just kind of maintenance and to get moving and these kind of things. Um, However, it's outlining goals and expectations.
Hmm.
So if someone does come to me and says, "Hey, I want to work out with you in person or online, either way, and I want to achieve XYZ goal. I want to lose 30 pounds in a month, and I'm willing to do whatever you say. And I'll say, okay, I don't think that, in this particular example, losing 30 pounds in a month, I would say, listen, I don't think that that's a good idea. However, if you wanted to do it, here is how we would do that. And then you lay it all out, and it will sound horrible, like endless
Right.
cardio, like basically not eating, like that. I'm using extremes just to kind of paint the picture here.
Yeah.
And then I kind of lay it all out, and it's like, okay, this is what we need to do in order to achieve that ridiculous goal. Are you willing and able to do that? And they'll say, oh, geez, I didn't realize that's what it was going to take. And then I said, yeah, well, this is not my choice. This is just the reality of the situation. So if you're not willing and able to do that, then we've got to switch the goals. And so
Yeah.
again, it's outlining goals and expectations. If someone wants, pretty serious results as far as weight loss, muscle building, mobility, whatever it is, we have to have an appropriate timeline and an appropriate measurement of that goal. And that's really the most important thing. So as long as we're on the same page with that, as long as a client is okay and understands the process, and this goes back to kind of taking ownership of like, what does it entail to get to where I want to go? I said that I wanted to lose 30 pounds. Okay, I can't do it in a month. Well, how long might it take? And the client who's asking that question and trying to, figure out, well, what is this process going to look like? Like, okay, we're doing this exercise today, and this is how my diet looks like on day one. But assuming things go well, what will things look like next month and then month after that and the month
Yeah.
after that? And they're trying to understand the progressions. So having that a little bit long-term thinking and then setting the client up for that, knowing what to expect, what's coming next. If you nail this month and you do all these things, then this is what we're getting to next month. And it builds a little bit of excitement, not expectation,
Yeah.
but excitement and anticipation. And that also builds adherence and just consistency and commitment to the program because they know what's coming next and they can see the method to the madness, and that really helps just explain things and able helps people be able to follow through on things.
Yeah, yeah. I think having those expectations and having something to kind of look forward to, having kind of those small wins, especially at the beginning. I've noticed, I've tried, especially with online clients, because a lot of them I've never met before,
Mhm.
and so we don't have that relationship, and so you get off a call with somebody, you sign up for a program, and then there's kind of this lull period, right? Where, well, did I make the right decision working with the guy? Because in person you have a client, you do a consultation, and if somebody walks into a gym and does a consultation with a trainer, there's a pretty good chance most of the time they're going to sign up. Not all the time, but it takes a lot of courage to go to the gym in the first place,
Yeah.
admit you need help, and then go seek a trainer, right? And so that it I feel like there's kind of a different experience between the two there. So what one thing I always like to do with my clients is, especially that first week or two, I try and get them a quick win. Try and get them a quick win, just so we're building momentum, and then we're kind of looking at, kind of like you said, that we're looking ahead, kind of laying out the process, because laying out the process is one thing, right? But if they can't envision themselves like seeing success, it can be very difficult. And so, do you do anything like that similar with your clients, where you're trying to get them some wins initially, or just how when you onboard a client, what's that kind of look like?
Yeah, definitely you want to get wins right off the bat, and more so than doing something specific to facilitate that. I find it's actually helping the client understand what those wins are.
Mhm.
So people automatically go to scale weight. That's like number one thing, right? Oh, it's been
Right.
a week, signed up for this trainer, paid all this money, downloaded the app, did whatever, and I didn't
Yeah.
even lose a pound. Oh my God, what a waste. This guy sucks. And we know that sometimes that happens. Like I'm sure you've got stories, I've got stories. Like there's clients who lose like 6 pounds in the first week, and it's
Right.
it's not repeatable, and it's not it's not gonna maintain that rate of weight loss, but like it
Yeah.
happens. But that's not everyone. There are some clients who the scale doesn't budge for a month. And it doesn't mean that they're not making progress. It just means that we need to look elsewhere for progress. The scale is great and wonderful and valuable and all those things, but it's not the only thing that measures progress. So again, going back to answer your question, I'm doing a lot of like going off road here and then bringing it back in. Um, it's looking for the thing. So it will just be question asking, like, hey, have your lifts got better in the gym? Did you sleep a little bit better? Do you feel a little bit better energy? Do your clothes fit better? And it's finding these other things and making them aware of it. Because sometimes, again, it's not anyone's fault that the only thing you want is you want to lose weight, and if the scale doesn't say in it, you don't know how to find it. You don't know how to find the progress. So by asking these questions, we can always find a win right off the bat, big or small. And then it's always this aha moment kind of thing where it's like, oh, I didn't realize that. Like, yeah, now that you say that, I did actually sleep a little bit better this week, and I
Yeah.
do actually feel a little bit more, energetic at work, and I was able to play with the kids. You know what? You're right. I didn't have to take a nap when I got home from work because I actually felt pretty good. And so it's these kind of things. So that's kind of how I'll go about finding those quick wins for people. There will be some people who maybe I'll take a little bit more of an aggressive approach right off the bat, and that's just more based on their personality and
Mhm.
because I know that they need to see certain markers or maybe a little bit more drastic of a win really early on, but then they also have to know that like this is not the way we're going to do it. And
Yeah.
the quickest, fastest, easiest way to do that, and like I don't like admitting this or saying this because it's so demonized like in our world of trainers and quote unquote evidence base and all this stuff,
Mhm.
but it's just removing or significantly reducing carbohydrates. Never fruits, but like you just drop your carbs, you're going to lose some scale weight real fast. You're going to notice some things, but then we know that like, hey, this is not forever. I refuse to let you continue doing this, but we will do this right up front because I know you'll drop a few extra pounds, and then we'll settle into something else. And sometimes that can help build adherence, but it depends on the person. And this is where like that, the personal part of personal training really comes into play.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely situations like that. I think I used to always, or I think kind of what you said with like the evidence base. We always talk about like, slow progress is still progress, and we want to lose 2 to 4 pounds a month and stuff like that. If somebody lost 2 pounds a month and they've been trying to lose weight for 20 years, they're going to be frustrated. That's just the reality of it, right? I always talk about, there's theory and then there's practice, right? And what works on paper, what you read in a research review about adherence and stuff, and what happens actually in the human experience are a lot of times two very different things, right? We
Hmm.
look at we look at muscle rep ranges. This is the best for muscle building. This is the best for fat loss. This is and all this. That's great, but if you're sleeping 4 hours a night, you're working from 4 a.m. You're a truck driver, you're traveling, and then all of a sudden, maybe the best time to work out, according to the research, was mid-afternoon, late evening, but you've already been up for 16, it's like,
Yeah.
and so not everything works for everybody. And I think, like what you said there, sometimes just dropping carbs or even dropping calories, right? Sometimes that works for a lot of clients because, it helps them kind of get those quick wins. It's going to build adherence. It's going to help them see that, hey, I am making progress, but you're educating them the entire time. You're saying,
Yeah.
hey, we lost 10 pounds in this first month here. That's probably not going to happen again, right? And then we explain why. Some of it was water weight, some of it was you've went from 2,000 steps a day to 10,000 steps a day. You went from 0 workouts to 3 workouts. You went from all fast food to cooking out. There's lots of things, and it's just hard to repeat. I've had clients lose 25 pounds in about 12 weeks, right? They just continue. But again, they weren't working out consistently before. There's all these factors in it. I've had clients who all they do is start working out and they lose 10 pounds in about 2 months. They didn't change their diet. They never tracked it. There's lots of different
Yeah.
factors that come into it. But I don't think, and I think that's where the coaching part comes in, right? You can you can sign up for an app and get great results, right? But there's no nuance there. And if you don't have the education to know like why is this working or not, then it can be very, very difficult. So I think that's where part of the human experience comes in. Now, with I'm sure you've had tons of clients, like, or hopefully not tons, but some at least, that come into your program. They have tried stuff in the past. They feel kind of maybe lost when it comes to why I can't see results, why I can't stick with it. They hire you, you lay out a program for them, but then they still continue to do the things that they were doing before because they don't 100% buy in, or they maybe I mean there could be a variety of reasons. What do you do in those situations?
It's very common.
Hmm.
And I think it's just because in the online fitness world, you're way less likely to have a client who is like brand new to exercise. And maybe they haven't joined another program. You may be the first coach that they hired,
Hmm.
but they still like follow multiple fitness accounts, read articles, watch YouTube videos, whatever it is. And so they're inundated by fitness content for months, maybe years before they decide to hire a coach. And with that comes some preconceived notions that intermittent fasting is the way, or you can only be vegan, or you can only be carnivore, or you can only do XYZ, and that is the way
Hmm.
to do things. And then they hire a coach, someone like you or I, who don't have like a specific approach. Like you and I don't give the same diet and the same thing to our clients, right? It's
Yeah.
one on one, everything's individualized, and there are some base principles, but it's not the same thing every single time for every single person. And sometimes that can be conflicting because it's like, hey, well, for 7 months, I've been watching this guy on YouTube who said that I need to do this. And now this
Yeah.
coach that I hired is telling me the exact opposite or something different. And that's tough. So, two ways to go about this. One, if the thing that they are asking for is, I've done a much better job at coming around to this in the past year or so, where maybe 2 years. I used to be like way more combative, like, no, that's stupid, that's nonsense, like you can't do that, like this is why, like, listen to me, whatever. Kind of past that now, ego thing. Now it's more like, okay, what is it that they're asking? Are they talking about intermittent fasting, losing, reducing carbs, whatever it is? Does this have a place in what we're doing? If it does, then I'll let them run with it because all of these things, or most of these things rather, they're not necessarily bad. They're just not like
Hmm.
the only way to do things. And the problem with the messaging is that it sounds like if you don't do this, you literally won't get results. When the reality is like you can do that, you could also do a completely different approach and arrive at the same conclusion.
Yeah.
So if that approach is seems like it's going to work for them, they already buy into it, then I'll let them run with it. We'll maybe tweak some things and make it a little bit more intelligent or a little bit more sustainable,
Yeah.
but I'll let them go with it. Then what happens from there is one education around how and why it's working. It's like, hey, it's not that the reducing the carbs. I keep going back to this example because it's probably the most common one.
Yeah.
And I think like reducing carbs and intermittent fasting are probably the two most common amongst men as well. Like the
Yeah.
whole intermittent fasting and the carnivore thing is blowing up amongst guys now.
Right.
Um, it's like, hey, it's not that the carbs are bad for you and that removing them is magic. Here is the science and physiology on like a basic level of what's going on, and this is why it's happening. So we'll run with it, but this is why it's happening. And then they kind of understand, like, okay, like I get it, but this seems to work for me. I feel good doing it. It seems like pretty sustainable. I'm like, great. If it works for you, then it works for you. And then when they start complaining about not building muscle, I'm like, well, we gotta maybe have a little rice in there. It's gonna help you. So that's number one. We'll roll with it in maybe a controlled or slightly modified manner. Number two is if I still think that based on what they're saying that this approach is really not going to work for them based on their lifestyle and or it has already proven to not be working for them, like they're telling me like, hey, I've been no carb for 7 months, I haven't lost a pound, I haven't done this. I'm like, hey, well, the reality is it's obviously not working for you, or you're
Yeah.
not adhering to it as closely as you think you are, but they're adamant about wanting to continue to do it. I will let
Yeah.
them do it and let them fail, and then point out in a nice way, point out the failures of it. Like, hey, you said this was working. You wanted to do this, and here are the objective results of you doing that after a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is. Do you think that this is right? And they'll say no because like it didn't work for them. I'm like, okay, well, here's why I think so. Here's why I think that it didn't work for you. And here, the coaching aspect is how I would change this approach a little bit differently. So, like your way, we tried it. I told you what was going to happen. I was right. It didn't happen, which also is another way of building trust. Like, hey, I'm going to let you fail and I'm going to tell you that that's going to happen. And when I can quote unquote predict the future, that is a way of getting the client to be like, oh, this guy, he actually does. I know he doesn't have a million subscribers on YouTube and whatever, but he knows what he's talking about. And so that happens. Let them fail. I'm like, okay, it's all right. Again, I think I said this last time, but it's somewhat of an analogy with like with kids. Sure, you've had this, and I used to see this all the time with kids that I coached in soccer. It's like, hey, if you do that, you touch that hot stove, like it's gonna hurt, and they'll kind of look at you and like, look at the stove and like, I'm warning you, like it's gonna hurt. Don't do it. They touch the stove, they hurt themselves. I'm like, yeah, see, daddy told you that it was gonna hurt, and there you go, it hurt. Right. But sometimes you gotta learn by falling flat in your face and figuring it out. So by letting that happen and then having a teaching moment after, this is what happened, this is why it happened, and here's how we're going to fix it going forward. That's kind of the second approach to some of those preconceived notions based on whatever other means.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I know we've talked about this before, but uh, for some reason we as guys, or maybe just people in general, we have to make our own mistakes, and
Yeah.
we try and learn from other people's mistakes, but it doesn't quite set in unless we're the ones doing them, right? It's kind of like, ice baths are big now, and everybody wants to jump on that and stuff. Are there benefits to it? Sure. Are they going to be the secret thing that's keeping you from losing weight? No. And
Yeah.
but it's like educating these things. I had a client ask me about hydrogen water and stuff, and it was like, so then we just dive in, like, like, what, what's your thoughts on it? Why do you want to include it and stuff like that? And you mentioned kind of like when you kind of predict the future, clients kind of look at you as like, oh my gosh, he has all the answers. One of the easiest ways to do that is I used to have clients weigh themselves just a couple times a week. We would do Monday and Friday, before the weekend, after the weekend, and we're still just looking at the overall trend of it, right? But what can happen sometimes is maybe you got down to 200 pounds, but then by Friday you were 204, but on Wednesday you hit 198 and you never actually saw that and stuff. So then they get frustrated. And so with my clients personally, I have them stand on the scale every day. We make
Mhm.
it a routine, make it a habit, get up in the morning, use the bathroom, whether you're in your boxers or shorts or whatever, you stand on the scale, you just log it in, and it just becomes part of your routine. That way you can see the 200, the 199, the 198, the 197, the 202, and so it's like we don't care about the daily fluctuation, we care about the overall trend, right? And so we want to hit like a new low each week. That's kind of what we're going for. And there tends to be patterns with weight loss. Some people will go from A to B very quickly. Others will look more kind of like an EKG. Others kind of just, it's kind of random. But doing that so much with clients, I've been able to kind of predict like where people's weight will go. As long as they are weighing themselves every day, they're staying consistent with their nutrition, they're staying consistent with their workouts and stuff. And it's kind of fun because I can tell them like, hey, I think you're gonna hit this weight this week. And then when they actually do, they're like, oh my gosh. But that just increases the buy-in, right? I've
Right.
had clients before where I've tried to explain it to, I show them somebody else's chart and I'm like, see, we can see here like every 4 days you hit a new low. And then once you hit the new low, then you go higher and stuff. And it doesn't quite set in until they're able to see it on their own chart. And so I think I've had clients get so frustrated because the weight's not going down. I'm like, well, if we zoom out, your chart's a little different. You don't really hit a new low except for like 8 days out. And so 8 days can be a long time when you're trying to lose weight. And so then I'll tell them like, hey, I think if we go until like Thursday, just trust the process till Thursday. I think you're gonna hit a new low. And then inevitably, as long as they stick with the process, they will hit it. And then all of a sudden they're bought in, their motivation's higher, they're thinking, oh, now I have an idea. But it didn't quite set in until they were able to do it themselves, right? They weren't able, it was harder for them to picture it when it was somebody else. And so when you're working with clients and they just, no matter what you're doing, they're having trouble buying into things, right? They're having trouble for the workouts. They and I think a lot of times when there's no buy-in there, they struggle to get motivated to work out. You
Mhm.
typically for my clients, we try and get it. Not everybody has 3 workouts a week, but that's where I try and get people eventually. For most people, that's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But a lot of times that Friday workout gets skipped, right? And so uh, Monday workout's always, for most people, easier to do. Start the week off right. Wednesday is pretty good. If you're working out Friday afternoon, there's a good chance that one's not always happen. Not that big of a deal. Every once in a while, you skip that workout. But if that continues every single week, now all of a sudden, we're skipping that same workout every week. And so uh, for a lot of clients, for me, they're very new to weightlifting or haven't done it in a long time, and so they can see a lot of results, as with the weights and stuff too. Not everybody gets that though, right? They don't do it consistently enough. They don't do it. They haven't been doing it for long enough to see the results. I will have some clients who will go 3, 4, or 5 months and they will not work out at all, and so they still lose weight. They still improve other health markers and stuff like that, But what do you do with your clients to, kind of preach the importance, I guess, of strength training, long term health, and just kind of the benefits overall? Is that a pretty big aspect of your coaching, or how do you kind of approach that?
It's a massive aspect of my coaching. I'd say for me, I'm like more exercise heavy than nutrition heavy because for me, like nutrition is so simple. Like it's very difficult to do it, but
Yeah.
but it's actually very simple. Like I
Yeah.
don't coach anyone who's a professional athlete or anything like that. So we're not getting into like, weight cutting and carb loading and proper
Right.
hydration and like, it's very, very basic stuff. Like, you
Yeah.
control our calories, get our protein in, set up some systems and some, meal prep like things to make it happen. And after that, like there's not a whole lot to talk about. Like it's kind of done. And
Yeah.
so it's more like, okay, what can we do with the exercise? You said you want to build muscle. You said you wanted to, to bench press, this much weight or whatever it was. And then it again comes back to expectations versus reality. You said you wanted to
Mhm.
do these things and your workouts, you haven't logged the workout in 3 weeks. So how can you expect that?
Yeah.
Then on layered on top of that is again this education piece where this stuff takes a long time. If people could, just continue to improve for forever, right? In the beginning, you're weightlifting, like you can make gains pretty quickly. Like you might
Mhm.
add 10, 20 pounds to like your main lifts like every week is not unheard of for a beginner. But eventually, like that obviously slows down. Otherwise, people like you and I would be out here squatting like 2,000 pounds, but we're not, and no one is, right?
Right.
So then it becomes the education around how long this takes and how much you're gonna have to fight for every pound after some certain amount.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's kind of where it lies in like the consistency and also just realizing that this is uh, it's a forever game. Like once you
Yeah.
hit your goal, well, what do you think happens after that? You don't just stop. Like once you hit
Yeah.
that goal, you bench press 2 plates and like you get fired up and you're really excited. Like you don't win the gym. You don't just stop after that. Like you
Yeah.
show up next Monday and you bench press again and that's it. Now you want to hit 230. Like that's what comes next. So uh, educating around that, around like, hey, this is a forever process. We're gonna hit milestones and little goals along the way. And it's okay to slip up and take weeks off and things happen and that's okay. Like I haven't exercised, 3, 4, 5 times a week every single day for the past 15 years either. Like it's not the way it goes. Um, but you have to understand that when we zoom out, there needs to be a level of consistency over time here. Otherwise, things are just not going to happen. And again, this is just reality. I think this approach typically works better with men, where it's like, hey, this is just the way it is. I don't
Yeah.
make the rules. Anthony doesn't make the rules. Like this is just the way it is. If you don't lift, you don't work out, you don't do your nutrition, you are not going to get results and nothing will ever change. So you can either accept that and be okay with that and see you later, that's fine, or we can start to do something about it. And so at some point that kind of tough love needs to really get in there and be like, you said you wanted this and we're not doing it. So do we need to change the approach? Maybe it's not lifting. Maybe you got to go do spin classes, or maybe you start running, or whatever, and that's fine, and like that's okay. But we got to find the thing that works for you because what we're doing is clearly not working if you haven't lifted in a couple months.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think framing it like you said is that, it's a long-term approach, right? And I think that's hard because there are so many, 30-day ab shred workouts
Yeah,
and all these things online. And, I think those are good for some people, like because it can kind of get them motivated, right? It can kind of give them that jump start to get back into it. Like, hey, I was able to do 100 push-ups for 30 days. Now
yeah,
I'm ready to go, but I think sometimes that can foster that all or nothing mentality, right? Like if I'm not doing it every day, then I'm probably not going to do it at all. And so that again, that's where the education comes in. And that's how my program is set up is I have a 12-week program, I have a 6-month program, and then I have clients who stick around on a month-to-month basis, or they commit to like a longer term approach. But the reason I do the 12-week program, and I think a lot of coaches do, is because it makes it seem more manageable.
hmm
Like if someone came on a call with me and they said, I have 100 pounds to lose, and I said, okay, well, I recommend you sign up to work with me for 2 years. And it's like it's just like that. It's hard to wrap your head around, like
Yeah.
2 years, it's a huge commitment. And, I've had clients who I've worked with for 4 years, 3, things like this. But I don't know when they first started if they thought, I'm gonna be with this guy for that long. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? But like
Yeah.
they obviously kept coming back. But like I think 12 weeks is like enough time for most people to see some results, right? If you can implement, the habits, the strategies, start working on your mindset and start seeing results, then you can buy in to that longer term approach. And so, but I think a lot of people think, there is some of that, we're looking at Instagram, we're looking at these things. And like you said earlier, the majority of our clients, they're not athletes. They're not, most of these things you see on Instagram, what you see on YouTube and stuff doesn't apply to 99% of people, right? Like even rest days. I love programming, the rest periods and stuff like this. But if you're only working out twice a week, you know what I mean? I was like, if you're going to be at the gym, let's get as much in, let's,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're going to be there for an hour, let's get a bunch in, because it could be another week before you get back there and
Yeah.
stuff. And so it's like, if so, like it's not always ideal to do strength training and cardio on the same day because it takes a long time, right? But if you're open on Wednesdays, you got a 2 hour block, that may be when you have to do it, because
Right.
that may be the only time you're getting there that week. And so I think just having that approach too, where it is individualized. Like obviously, like what works for clients. I know what works for clients. Clients think they know what works for them, but a lot of times, kind of back to that ownership, that coachability. I think that's what kind of bringing it back to where we started is. I think that's just what one of the biggest things overall I've seen with clients is the ones who are curious. They want to know more. They ask questions, and when they ask questions, they're willing to be wrong
Hmm.
or not know it. And so like I've had clients ask me questions all the time, and I explain, well, this is because of this, and this may happen, but this is probably what's going to happen. They say, okay, and that's enough for them to be like, okay, let's stay this course here. let's
Yeah.
let's keep going here. But I think those clients who struggle are the ones who ask questions but are looking for affirmation. They're not looking for that information and stuff.
Right.
And so what's as far as like strength training goes, somebody came to you, they've never worked out before. They don't really believe in the benefits of it. They're like, well, I've been able to eat my whole life, or I've been able to just eat whatever my whole life. I've always stayed relatively fit. I just don't understand why I need to work out. I've been doing fine. What would you kind of say to them?
Well, I mean, I don't think someone would come to me to hire me as a coach or like I don't think I've faced that question in like a professional setting because like if you're talking to a trainer
Right.
about hiring them, like conceivably you believe that like you should
Yeah,
exercise. But
that's fair.
this question does come up at like non-professional settings, just socially with friends of friends or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, I don't really exercise. I just like watch what I eat and I go for my walks. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's great. But the analogy that I'll always go to, which is kind of funny but also kind of true, is like sitting down on the toilet is a squat. And so, the toilet is like a ways down there. And so if you can't squat and you're so weak that you can't squat when you're like people can't squat now when they're young. What's going to happen when you're 90 years old? Like how are
Hmm.
you going to get down on the toilet and like go to the bathroom by yourself?
Right.
And that is something that makes people think like, oh, yeah, like okay, it's not about being able to squat 500 pounds. It's just about being able to get up off the toilet when I'm 90.
Yeah.
And so, a way that was explained to me when I was in school by one of my professors was there's a graph, and I'll kind of try and explain it. And it's not like a real graph, but like there's a line somewhere on the bottom that is like a minimum level of physical competency for independence.
Hmm.
Independence being defined as being able to go to the bathroom, dress yourself, make food, do like regular daily living things.
Hmm.
And so there's a prerequisite level of physical competency that we need for that. Now, all of us are, at some point you're increasing that physical competency as you grow and get older, and then at some point it starts going down. For all of us, at some point in our life, it is going to start declining.
Right.
if you strength train and make yourself stronger and more physically capable of things, you are starting off at a way higher point. So your rate of decline will be slower
Mm,
and start off from a way higher from a way higher point so that you will elongate the amount of time that you are physically independent and maybe forever. You maybe will be able to be physically independent until you die, which eventually like we're all gonna die. Versus someone who doesn't exercise, isn't physically active, doesn't strength train, doesn't do anything, when their body starts to decline physically, they are starting off at a way lower point and their rate of decline will be quicker. And this
mm-hmm.
is where you see people, have to be in wheelchairs, have to work with, PSWs or, different levels of assistance and whatever, just to do their normal life things. And so if it gets into this detail of a conversation with a stranger, then I will sort of explain that to them. Like, look, strength training is not about being the most jacked, having abs and having big biceps and a big bench and all this stuff. Like that stuff is super cool and awesome. And like you should chase that and it's great. But it is like lower on the list of the cool things that happen with fitness, right? It's your
Right.
confidence is going to go up. It's your physical ability to be able to play with your kids, to be able to play with your grandkids, to be able to do the things you love. You love hiking or I don't know, snowboarding or playing hockey or playing basketball, like whatever it is that you like doing. You want to be able to do that for as long as possible. We've all unfortunately probably know people who are older, maybe they're our grandparents or coaches or teachers or whoever they are, who they get to a point it's like can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm too old for that. And my thing is like, yeah, maybe I'm not going to be sprinting and jumping and doing crazy nonsense when I'm 90, but I would like to be able to do most of all the things that I love when I'm 90, that all the things
Mm-hmm.
that I do now, maybe not at the same level. I'm sure it won't be as strong or as fast, but I'm not going to have to sit on the couch and do nothing. And so that is my way of explaining the importance of strength training
Mm-hmm.
because if you're not already sold by like the abs and the biceps, like trying to just force that down your throat is not gonna it's not gonna do the thing. So it's making it very relatable to life and trying to pick something from that person's life if they've got kids, if they've got whatever, something else going on, to be like, hey, this is how this is going to improve everything in your life. And I truly do believe that fitness does improve. I'm obviously extremely biased at this, but fitness improves every single thing in your life. It is also a money making activity. I think people who are more fit will make more money because you'll spend less money on sick care and getting sick and getting injured and all these things. You'll be more productive at work, more energetic. You'll be more confident, and all of those things lead to making more money in the long run. So when people say fitness is expensive, I heavily disagree with that. Yes, it's not free to hire a coach and buy programs and memberships and equipment and all this stuff, but I think it's still a money making activity in the long run. So I know very long winded answer, but that is why you need to care about fitness.
Yeah. No, I think you explained that very, very well. I know a lot of the clients I work with, um, literally almost every single one of them has had a parent that has had heart issues or
Hmm.
passed away very young and they weren't able to do anything. And the sad reality is that the majority of them are preventable.
Yep.
And that comes back to, the ownership of it, right? I know that I had an uncle pass away. He was 60. He was 60 and he um had five kids, six kids. Let me see. No, I'm blanking.
Wow.
One, two, five kids. And to me, that's hard. Like that's hard to see because it's like it's not like you're obviously sad like when a family member passes away, but think of all that stuff they're missing out on,
Yeah.
right? You're missing out on, and the hard reality is that a lot of people will wait until it gets that bad before they do anything, right? I've talked to multiple clients or just people on calls that their dad passed away 20 years ago from a heart attack, and now they're the same age as their dad was when they died, and they're going through the same things, right? And it doesn't have to be a heart attack. It could be just simple things like you said, they can't run around because their knees hurt, their back hurts, right? But they
Yeah.
waited until things got so bad, right? And I think that's where, a lot of times when we look at uh like Instagram and things like that, is we see these unrealistic expectations there's a heavy usage of performance enhancers and and individuals and stuff. And so we look at individuals that "Oh, I'm never going to look like that, and there's a good chance you probably never will, because and that's okay. That's okay. And so I think that's our job as coaches, right? To like let people know like what's realistic for them, right? And we've both seen incredible changes, just from even just people who they can't walk around the block
Yeah.
on their own without having to sit on a park bench to running a 5K. And a 5K for that's a huge accomplishment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but if you only watch videos of marathon runners, you're gonna think, that's nothing and stuff. And so I think it's just tailoring those expectations to kind of like what you said. But
Yeah. And
I
this
think,
is this is just to interject there for a
yeah,
second,
yeah,
Anthony. Like this is just it's a good teaching moment because I think it's good to make light of this is how social media works. You and I are very fit individuals. I would say very confidently that you and I are both way above average level of strength, fitness in all areas. And that is not to brag or to whatever. That is just a reality. However, neither you nor I look like supermodel mega athletes, chiseled 8 pack, squatting 1,000 pounds and bench pressing 600 pounds. And like, we're not that. And so then the reality that I'm getting to with social media is like, do you want to see someone who can like do a couple more push-ups than you? Or do you want to see someone who can do something outrageous like bench press 800 pounds? I
right,
don't want to watch someone who's like can lift my lifts are impressive compared to the average, but the average is so low that it's like not a very it's not a very high bar to pass. I'm gonna scroll and I'm gonna watch the video of the guy bench pressing 800 pounds because holy hell, how do you do that? That is
yeah,
insane. The guy who's benching 185, 225, whatever, like cool, but whatever. I just watch a guy bench press 800 pounds. That doesn't look all that cool.
yeah,
The other side of that is like you're not going to see people going through their journey unless you are specifically out there looking for it. And it's not
yeah,
because people are not posting it. People are posting like the beginnings of their journey and whatever. But again, it's just not that cool to see someone who, has 30 pounds to lose and they're 17% body fat doing a workout versus seeing the exact same workout on someone who is, 7% body fat and they've
yeah,
been training for 15 years. Like that's just the reality of this. So when you see these things and you're discouraged by it or it changes your perception of reality, you have to always keep that in mind. Social media is the ultimate highlight reel. And it is completely, I mean, those people are real. There's edits and whatever, aside from like PD use, like all that separate. Like, there's edits and AI filters and all these things. And that sucks. But otherwise, like these things are achievable. It's just like this is the top 1%. It's like it would be the same as if every single person you met was as rich as Elon Musk. If
yeah,
every single person on your street was Elon Musk. We all want to keep up with the Joneses and have a nicer truck than the neighbor. And oh, that guy got
yeah,
a new TV, so I got to get a new TV. Like, imagine they were all Elon Musk, multi billionaires. Like, that's what you were competing against when you're looking at social media, saying like, why not me? So, I
right,
I know that we probably all know that, but just to reiterate, like you need to really like not get sucked into that. It's cool to watch and it's fun, it's entertainment, whatever. But you can't base your reality and your situation off of that.
yeah, yeah. And kind of like what we were talking about earlier, like seeking information or affirmation, right? I fully believe some of the best coaches I know, or some of the best coaches in the industry, have incredibly small followings. Now,
Yeah,
not that you have a huge following means you're a bad coach, not by any means. There's lots of great coaches, but I think the average individual will look at somebody's follower account and assume they just know more information. And I think there's lots of reasons why some
yeah,
accounts blow up and others don't. But I think that that's where kind of the education aspect comes from. And I do encourage clients to research things on their own too, right?
for
I
sure.
don't want to be the only source of information because then obviously then it's getting skewed one way too. But Daniel, I really appreciate this conversation. I think we dug into a lot of deep topics here, and like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, um, we tried to record this one about a week ago or so, and had a really good conversation there. And um, due to technical difficulties, that episode will be one of the lost ones. It will not become available. But I like I said, I appreciate you coming on here. I think I definitely learned just a lot from listening to you here, and I think the audience will too. Is there anything kind of a major takeaway or anything that you kind of want to leave us with?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for redoing this. The technical issues suck, but I feel like this was even a better one than the last one. So I'm happy that we redid it. As far as a takeaway, I think just to really drive it home, like take ownership of your own situation. Everything there's a notion today that you don't want to, people want to pass the blame to something else. Here's how I think of that. If it's not your fault, then you can't do anything about it, and you're you're effed. I don't know if you swear on this, but it's not good if it's not your fault because you can't do anything about it. However, if you think it's your fault, that means you can do something about it. And if you can do something about it, then you can improve your situation. So, fitness, nutrition, your lifestyle, your finances, your whatever, all of the things in your life. Make it your fault. Take ownership of it, make it your fault, and make it your responsibility to improve it. And things will get a lot better. Otherwise, you're screwed.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway and a great way to wrap up. Kind of that one thing that separates the clients who see results and others who struggle with them. Like letting life happen to you, or are you gonna take control of it? So I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. And just a side note there, the only people that ever cuss on the podcast are other coaches, which is ironic. But we mentioned earlier the Daniel Yores show on Spotify, Instagram, or not Instagram, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcast. Daniel's show is available on there. I encourage you to subscribe there. Where else can people find you on social media?
Everywhere, Instagram, Twitter, making a big push on Twitter, X, whatever now.
Awesome.
I'm just finding it a little more fun. But yeah, just my name everywhere, Daniel Yoris, very cleverly named and easy to find. So yeah, find me there, follow me, say hello. And thanks again for having me, Anthony. I appreciate you, man.
Awesome, man. Oh, we'll have to edit that. Push the wrong button there. That concludes this episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Thank you for those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to listen. If you have any questions or comments or an idea for a topic for a future episode, please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to hear from you.